Thank you to Dean Bowman. I also want to thank Dean Reyes from the Business School, Maylene Davis for the wonderful job she does, most especially in creating this opportunity for me to be home. It really is great for me to be home amongst friends and to have this opportunity. What I'm going to do is, they've given me 90 minutes to speak. I'm kidding. I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes, and then I hope we can talk a little bit and have a conversation, as I would love to not only hear questions, but frankly hear from you about whether anything that I say resonates with you. This is fun for me because it's been about 30 years since I have called Morgantown home. But in many ways, it's always been home and always will be. I get the opportunity to speak a fair amount in front of groups, business groups, universities, law schools, and the topics that I sometimes talk about can be a little bit dry, a little bit weighty. Things like the clash between globalization and cultural identity, the future of law 2025, the rule of law in the age of Trump. I always like the opportunity to talk about the law and business and policy, but when I was given the opportunity today to talk about some personal insights in my journey, I did jump at the chance. This is a chance for me to talk a little bit about a more personal story of my Morgantown roots, about the way in which relationships and lessons learned here continue to infuse my life with great success, and frankly, why the ingredients associated with growing up here and being a West Virginian mean so much to me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that and dive in. I've got a little bit of a presentation because I can't talk without a prop. So you'll see a little bit of that on screen. But if I'm going to be honest, I got to start with where we're standing now. And where we're standing is in this beautiful, for me, new Alumni Center. It's spectacular. But I have to confess that I am not a WVU graduate. I'm not a WVU alum. I'm enormously proud of my Syracuse, my Harvard Law School, and my Oxford degrees. But growing up here in Morgantown, all I wanted was to go to WVU. That was the dream. That's what I wanted to do. I was born about a half a mile, maybe actually less now what I think where I am, about a quarter mile from here at the WVU Medical Center. I was raised about 3/4 of a mile up Van Voris Road. I went to Boy Scouts at the church literally across the street. I think that away. I'm directionally impaired. Right over there. Thank you. Thank you, John. And that's where I was. I sold sodas at the old Mountaineer Field. I used to flip burgers at Hardee's at the intersection of Van Voris and Chestnut Ridge Road. Where is the Hardee's? Yeah, it is no more, but you get the picture. It's a Dunkin' Donuts now. Well, progress, I guess. I took classes at WVU in my last year of high school, and my parents told me I could go anywhere that I wanted for college other than stay home. They were both WVU faculty members, and in defiance, I decided I would only go to a school that played WVU in football. You'll appreciate that, Shane. That meant I couldn't go to Pitt or Penn State because in those days, those were the rivals and there was no way on earth that I would ever set foot on those campuses. So I ended up at Syracuse. It maybe wasn't the best reason to select a college, but that way I was guaranteed every, at least other year, to be able to see my beloved Mountaineers on the Syracuse campus when they came to play football. Let me follow up on what Maylene said, which is to give a little shout out to my mother, who is in the audience. It is frustrating to me that there are more people here to see her than are here to see me. so it goes. But she taught speech communication and gerontology here at WVU for about 40 years, winning outstanding professor awards, making great contributions to the community, and for a generation of students, many of whom will still see me from time to time, a couple are in this room, say that she was the best professor they ever had. But since she's here, I note that I'll have to be a little careful in my comments, and that I don't talk a whole lot about those nights spent back in Sunnyside during the days that couches on WVU football victory nights were used for something other than sitting. So as you've heard, I am the global CEO of a law firm called Dentons. Dentons is, as you've also heard, the largest law firm in the world. We have nearly 9,000 lawyers working in 158 offices in 66 countries on 6 continents. In the history of the legal profession, which dates back a little ways, some might say it's the second oldest profession, but there's never been a law firm this large. And it causes me to reflect a little bit on that old joke, what do you call 1,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. Well, with 9,000 lawyers, I guess we're well on our way. At Dentons, we have twice as many lawyers as our closest competition, but we never set out to be the world's largest firm. We actually aspire to be the world's leading firm and believe that quantity can be a tool for quality. It's kind of this simple. I've never met a client that says, I need 9,000 lawyers to help me on something. But I meet a lot of clients who say, I need the right lawyer in the right place with the right expertise right now. And it's simply mathematically more likely with 9,000 lawyers than with 900 or 90 or 9 that we're going to have that right lawyer. So we believe that quantity can very much be a tool for quality. And I'm very proud and happy to say that it's working. Last year, in 2016, we were the most awarded law firm in the world, something about which we're hugely proud, with dramatic increases in our quality rankings and awards worldwide for client service, for innovation, for pro bono, for community contributions, and for our service. While the law, as many of you know, and we've got some outstanding lawyers in the room, while the law has always been a profession, it's also a pretty big business. We employ 15,000 people, and last year as a law firm we generated $2.5 billion in revenue. And that's a billion with a B. We're very proud of all of our clients, but we are particularly proud as the world's largest firm that we currently represent 160 of the 200 largest companies in the world. Some of these logos I'm pretty confident will be familiar to you. Unless you've been living in a cave, you'll recognize a few of them. We're continuing to grow very rapidly. We have a reputation in the legal business as the challenger brand, as the brash disruptor, as the firm that does things they said couldn't be done, and that continues to do the unorthodox. So while I'm immensely proud of what we've accomplished as a law firm, I want to step back and focus today on the path that started here in Morgantown. And I'll use a little map to help with that path. As I hope is obvious by now, I am an enormously proud West Virginian. I didn't get my diploma from here, but you will not find a bigger fan of this university. Last week, I was in Kunming, China. And the week before that, I was in São Paulo, Brazil, where we just launched in the Brazilian market. From São Paulo, I went to Houston, and from Houston, I was in Los Angeles. The week before that, I had to be in London for a series of meetings. And from London, I visited our Watford and our Milton Keynes offices. You've probably not been to Watford or Milton Keynes, but they're locations about 40 minutes by train from London, where we have strong teams. And then I ducked up, if the map is showing where I went next, went up to Glasgow and then to Edinburgh, both in Scotland, where we just added 400 new lawyers as part of the firm. Next week, unfortunately, I won't be here, but I head to Lima, Peru. From Lima, I go to Amsterdam to give a speech, and then I get to spend next weekend in Beijing, China. Second trip to China in a month, though that's unfortunately not all that unusual. Right after Thanksgiving, I'm heading to London, but I just set that trip this morning and didn't have a chance to add it to the PowerPoint, and I'm not very good at PowerPoint to begin with. But before the end of the year, I'm heading up to Toronto for a series of meetings. Then I will be in Paris, and we'll end the year with a trip to Southeast Asia. Tomorrow, I hit the road again, and that's not unusual. That's kind of my typical schedule, as crazy as it seems to my mother. But this is home. And I carry my mountaineer pride and the lessons that I learned everywhere that I go. I left Morgantown, as you heard, in 1983 after graduating from Morgantown High for Syracuse. It wasn't WVU, but I enjoyed it a great deal and I thrived there. I was able to spend my first 2 summers back in West Virginia. First, working for the North Central West Virginia Legal Aid Society, the head of legal aid here in West Virginia. Gretchen happens to be here, and that was a fabulous experience for me. And then the next summer for the West Virginia Attorney General. Both experiences really shaped my interest in the law and helped me understand how the law could really help change lives. And then I was able to spend 9 months in Washington, D.C., working for the U.S. Senate, while ostensibly a Syracuse student. And even with that stint in D.C., I was able to graduate from Syracuse in 3 years, becoming Syracuse's first Rhodes Scholar. That was 1986. And as some of you may know, in 1986, West Virginia had already had 20 Rhodes Scholars. Syracuse hadn't had a single one. But having seen the way this university, could really support students as they were applying for the Rhodes and the success that those students had, it really gave me the confidence to apply, knowing that I'd learn a lot about myself in a process that, as my mother famously noted, I had no chance of winning. Got the letter to prove it. But what's important about the Rhodes actually isn't winning, although it definitely does beat the alternative. But it was the way that West Virginians involved in the process embraced me and became mentors and advisors. My West Virginia Rhodes Selection Committee had some fabulous people on it, starting with David Hardesty. Back then, before you knew him as a president, I knew him as one of the people who was in that room helping guide me. There were some others as well, a guy by the name of Pete Kalis, who became the leader of a very large law firm, not as large as mine, but a pretty good and large law school. And I will tell you that David and Pete and others believed that being involved in the process, giving back to the community, was something that they loved. As David once told me, it's a great opportunity to pick people who have a fire in the belly. I think he'll remember saying that. And this group of West Virginians has continued to this day to look after me, to guide me, and to guide the 24 or so other West Virginians who have had the really extraordinarily good fortune to win a Rhodes. But from the state process, I went to the regionals, the finals. The process is a little different now. I think it's easier, right, David? Because back in our day, we were lumped together with New York and Maryland and D.C. and Pennsylvania and Delaware. It was the toughest region. And the then secretary of the West Virginia Rhodes Trust, Roger Tompkins, played a huge role. Some of you will know Roger. He's very close friend of David's for many, many years. And Roger later stepped in, he was an extraordinary lawyer, stepped in to become West Virginia Attorney General. Until his passing, he was very much a mentor, kind of like a rabbi to me. And he was someone to whom I would turn whenever I had a tough decision that I needed to make. And that's what West Virginians do in a very real way. We look out for each other, you look out for each other. And for me, winning the roads was life-changing, but the part about this, about which I take the greatest pride, is West Virginia's embrace in making it all possible. And that lesson, our shared capacity as West Virginians to help each other, is something that I still try to apply daily. It's why when Maylene reached out for me, there wasn't a chance on earth that I wouldn't take a meeting with someone from West Virginia. We all have an obligation to pay it forward, and I'm standing here because a rather extraordinary group of West Virginians did just that. My experience at Oxford was transformative, as it has been for, I know, David and many other West Virginians. The academic and intellectual experience at Oxford couldn't be more different from the US one. It is at once rigorous and exhilarating. I learned one-on-one with an Oxford professor. I had to defend my position in tutorials, literally standing up and reading out loud, and then being forced to defend and debate what I had to say with someone who knew the material a heck of a lot better than I did. Oxford truly is unique among the world's educational institutions, and I feel richly blessed to have been given the opportunity to be there for 3 years and to earn a PhD. Oxford's also a place where I forged some lifelong friendships with some remarkable people who have gone on to be cabinet secretaries, members of Congress, diplomats, and who are otherwise changing the world. I learned immensely from these relationships, and they remain an important part of my life. I'd note the West Virginians who spent time together at Oxford have an incredibly close bond. And I was reminded of this last year at about this time when I had the good fortune to attend the opening of the African American History and Cultural Museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C. It was a beautiful, sun-drenched day. President Obama and the First Lady, former President Bush, the entire cabinet, the congressional leadership, and a long list of Hollywood A-list celebrities were all there for this momentous, really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I had great seats. I was in the third row from the front, sitting with the president's cabinet, 2 of whom happened to be Oxford classmates. I was there not because I knew them or because of what I've done, but because my wife has a client who contributed $5 million to the museum. So we had some pretty good tickets. So the program begins with speeches, very powerful and moving speeches, as you might imagine, musical tributes, videos, more speeches, and 2 of us sitting up front in my section are getting really anxious. We're getting very, very nervous. We're looking at our watches, we're looking at each other, and we're wondering, when will this end? And here we are, the opening of a Smithsonian Museum commemorating African American history and culture, and I'm looking at my watch. Looking over at Sylvia Matthews, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and a Hinton, West Virginia native and an Oxford and Rhodes classmate. We were really anxious, wondering, when will this end? Why? Well, WVU was playing BYU at FedEx Field in Washington, D.C., and there was no way we were going to miss that kickoff. And no matter where we are or what we're doing, I can tell you that our West Virginia roots run very, very deep. But there were 2 even more important parts of my experience at Oxford. The first was that the roads opened my eyes to the world. I was given the opportunity on someone else's nickel to travel. I was able to go to Africa, to the Middle East, all across Europe, all across the UK, to the Soviet Union when it was still the Soviet Union. That experience shaped the way I think about business, about trade, about immigration, about the rule of law, and it's why I stand here before you as an unapologetic globalist. As I believe the nation, and in particular I believe our state, is better when we lead the world rather than withdraw from it. My time at Oxford also was really important to me because it gave me my first real opportunity to give back to the community. While at Oxford, I founded an organization called KEEN, or Kids Enjoy Exercise Now. It's a nonprofit organization that provides free one-to-one recreation opportunities to children with disabilities. We specialize in serving the hardest to serve population, meaning those with more severe and profound disabilities, and those who are more likely to be excluded from other organizations, whether it's church or synagogue youth groups, boys or girls, scouts, or even Special Olympics. Today, 30 years later, KEEN is the largest program of its kind in the UK. And when I returned to the US after Oxford, I was given the opportunity to do it again. And I launched KEEN in Washington, D.C. We started very small. Today, KEEN has 30 separate programs across D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. And we have affiliates now in 6 other cities across the United States: Chicago, New York, LA, San Francisco, Phoenix, St. Louis, and San Francisco, if I got my, my list right. What I'm particularly proud of, however, is that over that period of time, KEEN has trained more than 50,000 volunteers, giving most of these people their first exposure to people with disabilities by coming to KEEN. And now, because of that experience, there are 50,000 people out there who are more sensitive, more understanding, more welcoming to people with disabilities when they encounter them in the classroom, at work, or at the mall. It's also important to me because my time with KEEN has taught me some of the most important lessons in life about persistence and perseverance and patience and measuring progress in small steps. And I'm deeply grateful that Oxford and the Rhodes gave me that chance that otherwise I probably wouldn't have had, and it truly has been life-changing. So back to the journey. I've slowed down and I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. I returned to the US after Oxford, and I completed my JD at Harvard Law School. After law school, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I joined a D.C. law firm where I practiced for several years. In 2002, I moved my team to a law firm you probably haven't heard of. Greg has, but most probably haven't, called Sonnenschein, Nath & Rosenthal. It sounds more like a deli than it does a law firm. But I moved to Sonnenschein, and it was a firm with wonderful history, over 100 years old, great people, and fabulous values. And in 2007, I was elected chairman of Sonnenschein, becoming the first partner who was outside of Chicago to lead the firm, and the first partner who didn't start his or her practice at Sonnenschein to lead it. And that's really the starting point for what now is Dentons. I looked around at my firm in 2007, full of some really great lawyers, but the largest law firm in the United States that didn't have a single international office, and a law firm that was very much indistinguishable from about 24 other law firms, and a firm that was having trouble attracting and retaining clients and talent. And I knew we had to take some very bold action. Unfortunately, coming to be chairman also coincided with another event. As I said today during lunch with the law students, it was about the same day that I became chairman that this all happened. The global economic collapse. The meltdown that buffeted the world economy and every law firm. Everyone was hunkering down, and we had a choice. We could try to ride it out and hide under our desks, the way everybody else seemed to be doing, or we could pursue an opening that we saw in the marketplace. And in December of 2008, about the bleakest period for what was playing out in our economy, on the day that a leading newspaper editorialized whether New York would ever again be relevant as a world financial market, we struck, and we decided to double down in New York. There was a law firm that had its history in the 1800s called Thatcher, Prophet and Wood, very highly regarded firm that within the space of a week lost 60% of their revenue as their two largest clients, Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, went under, and went under like that. And when you're in my business and you lose 60% of your revenue and you don't have much coming in from anyone else, it's not a good sign. And so over the course of 7 days in December, in two conference rooms, I was in one and the banks were in the other, we negotiated back and forth. We added 100 lawyers from that firm, believing that if we could add 100 capital markets lawyers to our firm in New York, it would change our brand and create a different set of opportunities for us. The media thought we were absolutely nuts. My favorite headline was, "Portnoy has lost his head." They wondered, with the world economy collapsing, what on earth are you doing adding capital markets lawyers, the lawyers responsible for all this happening in New York? But we stayed true to our course. Even my partners had some questions, and I'm happy to say that it worked. The first step in New York allowed us to make the next move, and we quickly shifted our focus globally. And you'll remember the name of that firm, Sun & Shine. And in 2010, while the economy was still a little weak, we combined that firm with one of the oldest law firms in England, a firm called Denton Wild Sapt, and we created a new firm that we called S&R Denton, the S&R for Sun & Shine, Nath & Rosenthal, the Denton for Denton Wild Sapt. And I became the global CEO, and we suddenly had access to the UK legal market with 400 lawyers and the largest network of offices in the Middle East. Overnight, therefore, we became a global law firm with the ability to follow our clients into the places that clients needed us to be, and with the ability to attract clients and talent that had previously been unavailable to us. That was 2010. The economy was still pretty shaky, and most firms were continuing to keep their heads down, and we decided to keep growing. We added teams in a number of markets, and in our next big move in 2013, just 3 years later, our firm, S&R Denton, completed the largest ever three-way combination in history of the law with two other law firms. Salins, a European law firm that had offices, about 500 lawyers throughout Central, Eastern, and Western Europe, and Fraser Milner Casgrain, or FMC, as you see their logo, which was a 600-lawyer law firm in Canada with 6 offices across the east and west of Canada, to create a firm called Dentons. And most people, including the media, when they saw we had 2,500 lawyers, thought they've gotten it right. They've done it. Now they can pause and digest, and they assumed we were done. And it wasn't even close. When we created Dentons, nearly every law firm with which we competed was based in either the US or the UK. Each had a dominant culture, either an American culture or an English culture. A headquarters. These are firms that wanted everyone to practice the same way, that was pretty rigid in the way that they did business with very little flexibility. They would often send lawyers out from New York or from London to invade or to colonize a new market. And we decided to go in a new direction, one that had never been followed in the legal business, and we decided to become a polycentric firm. Many centers rather than one, no headquarters, no dominant culture, a law firm that's deeply rooted in the community in every place that we do business. And using this strategy, we've continued to grow, and indeed, while it's not terribly humble, we've done more combinations, mergers, and acquisitions than any law firm in the history of our profession, including a couple that I'll quickly walk you through because it will take me a little while. The first one, probably worthy of note, was in 2015. We became the first global law firm to do a combination with a Chinese law firm. In this case, the largest law firm in China. It was said it couldn't be done, and that in particular, a global law firm that did business in the US would never get approval from the government to be able to combine. It was by far the hardest set of negotiations in which I've ever been engaged leading them, but we got it done. And today we have 4,000 lawyers spread across 43 offices in China as the world's largest law firm and China's largest law firm. We then did a big deal in the US with the McKenna, Long & Aldrich firm, a firm with deep roots in Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and California. We picked up an entire office in Budapest from one of our competitors, White & Case. We did a big combination with a firm called OPF Partners in Luxembourg, a very important tax and corporate haven for our clients. We opened in Milan, now our most profitable office in all of Europe. We opened in Watford, just outside of London. We combined with the largest and oldest law firm in Singapore called Rodike & Davidson. So old that 3 of their founders have streets named after them in Singapore. We then turned our attention to Latin America, combining with Lopez Velarde, a very strong energy boutique in Mexico City. And then went a little further south and combined with one of the most elite law firms in all of Latin America, the Cardenas & Cardenas firm in Bogota, Colombia. We were doing so well in Milan, we thought we should open in Rome, and that office is thriving as well. Australia seemed like a blank space on the map, and we combined with a firm called Dentons, giving us 300 lawyers spread across multiple offices in both Australia and Papua New Guinea, for those who were wondering. We continued our focus on Latin America, combining with a firm called Munoz Global, giving us offices in Costa Rica, in Panama and Guatemala, and soon in El Salvador and Honduras and Nicaragua as important markets for us in that marketplace. We opened in Monterrey, Mexico, building on our strength in Mexico City. We combined earlier this year with the Buchel firm in Amsterdam. I think you're getting the picture here. Been a lot of growth. In Tbilisi, Georgia, in Myanmar, formerly Burma, we now have an office. Most recently, we've entered the Brazilian market, the largest economy in South America, and a market that they said global law firms might not be able to enter. We're there now. In Lima, Peru, where I'll be next week. In Scotland, with the Macleay's firm, and in Uganda, where we've just announced and completed a deal in Kampala, a fascinating marketplace. I realized when I was driving here today that I missed 2 things. We just opened a new Melbourne office last week. That didn't make it onto the map. And I also recognized we failed to list a combination in South Africa, which maybe is the one I'm most embarrassed isn't on the list, because it may be the one I'm most proud of. In South Africa, we combined with a black-owned firm, Kapti Twala, and in South Africa, that makes a big difference. So that means we are the only global law firm that is Black Economic Empowerment certified in South Africa, which means we can do things none of our competitors can do. So the global CEO of the only black law firm in South Africa is a West Virginian. Who would have thunk it? Earlier this year, the legal media ran a story asking whether Dentons was slowing down. All I could do was laugh, because while our law firm, as I think you've seen, does a lot of things, one of them is not slow down. The lesson, at least for me in all of this, is that the conventional way of doing business in both life and in business sometimes just doesn't work. Doing what our competitors had done would have been a strategy. It just wasn't a strategy that I was particularly eager to follow. And I try to follow as much as I can the advice that is variously attributed to either Emerson or Thoreau, depending on which English professor here will correct me. But that's that you shouldn't go where the path may lead. You should go where there is no path and leave a trail. It's liberating in business to be able to do what the experts said couldn't be done. And we built a firm that was unimaginable a few years ago. My job as global CEO is to to grow and to integrate the firm, to knit it all together, which means I spend most of my time on airplanes, as you've seen, calling on clients, visiting offices, and looking at new markets where we may have an opportunity to grow. It's a little more complicated in a firm like mine, where there's literally no hour of the day or no day of the week when there isn't someone somewhere where an office is open for business. So it really is 24/7 in the truest sense of that. When you look at that map, you might say, are we done? Or where's next? We're going to grow more in Africa. We're going to grow more in Latin America, in Southeast Asia. And we need to be bigger here in the US, which is the world's largest legal market. Importantly, while I talk a lot about where we serve clients, I want to talk just a bit about how we do it, because we're very focused, as Dean Bowman and I discussed with the students today, on innovation, because innovation is really what matters in the law these days. In 2014, we created something called Next Law Labs, which is one of the best-known legal technology accelerators or incubators. It's wholly owned by my firm. We develop technology solutions with our clients, and we've invested in some companies that are developing their own solutions. Building on that innovation, we created something we call the Next Law Global Referral Network, which is the world's largest and only free referral network. We have over 500 law firms around the world who we can refer work to if we don't have the right person at the right time in the right place to do a client's work. And importantly, it gives us 500 law firms, when they can't do something, to send work to us. A very thinly veiled revenue generation opportunity. I recognize this sounds a whole lot like advertising for my firm, and I apologize, not really. But it is, I think, important to note that there's a reason why in the law these days an unconventional approach is really necessary. In the same way that other professions that sell ideas for a living, accountants, consultants, architects, those businesses have undergone huge change. But those of us who are lawyers were fat and happy. We thought that what we did was so exceptional that we would never face the same set of trends. And what I'm here to tell you is that the law is now facing the same seismic change that our clients are facing and that other professions have faced. As Dean Bowman knows so well and talked about today, this is actually a pretty challenging time for lawyers and law firms. For the last really 4 or 5 decades, it was quite literally the golden era for law firms. As we joke today, if you kept your door open and you didn't do something foolish, you could count on double-digit returns in revenue and profitability. That's the way it was. That seemed to end pretty much on the day I became chairman of my firm. But it's not that way anymore. We used to talk about lawyers having clients. Well, the truth is today it's the clients who have the lawyers, and that's having a profound impact on lawyers, on law firms, and as we talked about today, on law schools. You see some of these trends, but clients just don't need lawyers the way they used to. Demand for legal services is stagnant or falling across the US and indeed across the world. The billable hour, the dominant way that we used to price our services, is dying. It's not dead yet, but it's on its way. Law firms face competition from new market entrants, from business process and legal process outsourcers, from virtual and cloud-based law firms, from the Big Four accounting firms who are entirely in our space. Clients are demanding that we up our games and deliver everything better, faster, and cheaper. They're using procurement processes, RFPs and panels, to pick legal counsel. And that means the team that helps a company decide what pencils to buy in the morning, in the afternoon is helping that company decide what lawyers to hire. Clients assume that all lawyers know what they're doing. The quality is the same. It's table stakes. And so they're looking for lawyers who can demonstrate that they can do things better, faster, and differently, not just better, faster, and cheaper. They're demanding innovation in our service, in our quality, and in the way we deliver what we provide them. But as I like to say, but wait, there's more. It gets worse. There's more gloom and doom. The digital revolution is here. The artificial apocalypse is upon us. And there are predictions that as much as a third of the work that young associates in law firms are doing today will be done by machines in 5 years. I gave an example at lunch, I'll repeat, but that makes it real. Our client, JP Morgan Chase, the large financial institution, amongst the thousands of things they do, they have commercial loan agreements, $25,000 or so a year, that they turn to lawyers to help process, manage, and negotiate. Well, those 25,000 commercial loan agreements took JP Morgan Chase in 2016 360,000 hours of lawyer time. 360,000 hours. They worked with a technology provider, developed their own solution, and today, every time they have a commercial loan agreement, it goes through this software package that takes 60 seconds. Wow. So think about it. It's great if you're JP Morgan Chase, and frankly, we applaud their innovation. It's great to be able to achieve those efficiencies. But if you happen to be one of the lawyers providing those hours, it's not so great. And that's the world that we live in. And with changes like this, it's getting harder for firms, not just big firms like mine, but even smaller firms, to be able to afford the cost of investing in cybersecurity and technology and the other required costs of doing business. And each of these trends that you see here, this parade of horribles, is moving faster and faster. It's accelerating at lightning pace, and it's causing law firms to go out of business in record numbers, and causing most of us who are lawyers to encourage our children not to be lawyers. This is a sign that I'm particularly fond of. I'm not sure about the farmers and the loggers, but I think you get the point. And to be clear, I'm not suggesting any of you be particularly sympathetic to lawyers. We make a very good living, and our profession has had very little change over the last several decades. But now change is the order of the day, and some law firms are hoping that things will just get back to the way they used to be. As we talked about today, that's not going to happen. This is the new normal, and you either adapt or you die. You have to change before you have to, and those firms that are not doing so, those law firms that are not doing what WVU School of Law is doing, which is embracing innovation, are in real trouble. And I take pretty seriously the commitment that we've made to our people that we're going to build the law firm of the future right now, because I have 15,000 people who work for our firm who, together with their families, are depending on us to get it right in this pretty complicated period. And in order to do that, I spend most of my time focused on something that may surprise you, which is change management. It's really what leading a business is about these days. But it's a business full of lawyers, and if you don't know any, you might not be aware that getting lawyers to change is a particular challenge. So I'm going to use a little graph just to emphasize this, and I'm nearly done here. But this graph is something that you may have seen various versions of. It's called the Teller graph, and it's named for a guy with a great name, Astro Teller. It's really his name. And Astro has an even better job. He is the captain of moonshots for Alphabet. And Alphabet, if you're not aware, is the parent company for Google. You've probably heard of Google once or twice. And so this chart simply shows the rate of change going up along the axis over a period of time. And it also measures how much people adapt to that change. And we'll start with technology. And this is imperfect, but it probably won't surprise you that the technology was really not a particular factor in our world for many, many years. But in recent years, you've seen a dramatic rate of change. I don't have my iPhone 10. It's supposed to be at the office tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it, but hopefully it'll recognize my face. But there is just an extraordinary rate of change. But you consider the extent to which you have this dramatic change in technology against the extent to which humans are adapting to that change. And what you see is that there is a gap, indeed a pretty pronounced gap that is only growing. Hopefully that's not my phone, good. And you see this pretty significant change over a period of time. And you can say the same if you're looking at globalization and the extent to which humans are adapting to globalization, or environmental factors. But as we like to joke, we lead a law firm, but it's not a law firm of humans, it's a law firm of lawyers. And as you see, lawyers adapt to change considerably differently than humans do. And if you look at that gap, it gives you a sense of the kinds of challenges that those of us who are in the legal business have to face. I know that changing mindset is something that all of you, especially those of you connected to WVU, are very much engaged in every day as it's core to WVU's mission. Those who are faculty members are working to be able to ensure, consistent with your mission statement, that you develop prosperity and lead transformation in West Virginia. Transformation is hugely challenging, and it's, as I think the faculty in the room would probably attest, it's as much about changing people's mindset as it is any intellectual or substantive initiative that you might embrace. So with all of those storm clouds and doom and gloom, I'm going to return to and kind of wrap up my journey, and then I hope we can have a conversation. And I'm going to note on a much more upbeat note that since I'm telling my personal story, I got to make it complete, that I get my greatest joy from my family. I live in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside of Washington, with my wife Esty and our three kids, Josh, Noah, and Daniela, or Danny, as we call her. Danny's not happy I'm showing this photo because she doesn't think she looks good in it, but I think she looks great. While my kids have grown up in a very different environment than I did here in Morgantown, I want to assure you that I made sure for years that they caught at least one WVU football game a year, staying with our dear friends, the Rosenbluths, on those road trips, typically on homecoming weekends so they could go to a parade down High Street where they threw candy. Who knew that such a thing happened? And I happen to like this photo. I'm sure they probably wouldn't be happy that I was showing it to you. I try my best to get to those WVU games whenever I can. This is a photo of my son Noah and me at that WVU BYU game at FedEx Field that I mentioned. I love football. I hope, Shane, you'll resonate with this, but I love football. And indeed, my oldest son, Josh, plays college football. He is big, just not WVU football big. He's about 6 feet, 240 pounds, and he's the starting fullback at Pomona College outside of Los Angeles. Just had his first college touchdown a couple of weeks ago. My 17-year-old son Noah and his sister Danny, just like their older brother, attend Sidwell Friends School in Washington, D.C. It's a fabulous, diverse, rigorous, really amazing school in Washington where their classmates and friends are quite literally the children of presidents, the grandchildren of vice presidents, and the kids of the media and political elite of Washington. It's a little different from growing up in Morgantown, to be sure. But as with virtually every part of my life, I try to celebrate the differences, recognizing that I'm never far from my West Virginia relationships or those roots. As I mentioned, next week, indeed tomorrow, but next week I'm hitting the road again for Latin America, Europe, and China. But in truth, the places that I visit are really far closer to Morgantown than they've ever been. Technology and innovation are shrinking the world in a very real way, impacting every part of our lives. And I'm proud to say that WVU is at the center of that innovation here in West Virginia. I'm not surprised. I used to ride the PRT when I was a kid in between campuses. What else would you expect but innovation? But what was kind of once barely imaginable here and around the world is rapidly becoming a reality. And that means all of us, irrespective of our age, need to adapt and to change. We need to prepare the next generation of West Virginians to become more agile, more driven, more connected, more willing to believe in themselves, and equally more demanding that those of us that came before them reach back and lend a hand to help them out. So I want to end kind of where I started. I was born and raised here in Morgantown, and I believe in my soul I'm very much who I am today because of this community. Growing up in West Virginia has shaped in more ways than I can tell, or at least more ways than you give me time for, shaped who I've come to be as an adult. I know, even though I'm at a distance, the struggles that our state faces, but I also know the strengths of this state and of our community and the way in which the value of education, the bonds of our shared experience and the support for each other, our ambition to leave the place better for our children, to enhance opportunities for them, our unwillingness to accept the status quo very much runs in our veins. So as I was driving in today, looking around, looking for Hardee's, I noted that this was the place, not Hardee's, but Morgantown in all of West Virginia. This is the place where I found perspective and purpose, and I know so many of you feel the same, and it's why you're here. I'm deeply grateful to all of you for the part that you continue to play in that purpose, and I want to thank you for having me back home, for the warm welcome, and I'd be absolutely delighted to answer any questions that you have. So thank you.